I'm Judy. Hi, everybody online. And I'm part of CoRise. And for people who don't know what CoRise is, we're a new education platform that transforms the way professionals learn. And we do that through the industry's best folks like Dennis, who's going to teach a Dagster class in a bit. And the format of our courses, we mix live instructor sessions with real world projects and firesides like these who are experts in their field. And so speaking of expert, I'm going to introduce Dennis. Dennis, he's a staff data engineer at Dutchie. He has over a decade plus experience in the data space, focusing on platform engineering and data infrastructure. And he has helped many companies improve their data stacks, from Wolfram Alpha and Epic, and most recently Dutchie and Drizzly. So happy to have you here, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited about the class. And that class is really just going to focus on how to build, design, and maintain a data platform that can really support a wide range of tasks. And really the backbone for building that all out is Dagster. So it's something I've been really excited about and really happy to talk more about that. And also very happy to have Pete Hunt, who is the head of engineering at Elemental, who are the maintainers of Dagster. And Pete's previously led teams at Twitter, co-founded Smite, and was a member of the early React team at Facebook. So yeah, Pete, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, I think just to kind of dive in, I was reading your blog post about joining the Elemental team, and you said that joining Elemental was the obvious next step. So I'm kind of curious just when you first started playing around with Dagster and what was exciting about it.
Yeah, so I've had an interesting journey to get to Dagster. So I guess I originally, my first kind of, touch with Dagster was I had overlapped with Nick Schrock, the CEO and founder of Dagster, when we both worked at Facebook on completely unrelated things. So I had known about the company, and I had known about some of the great folks in the past that I've worked with who had gone over there. But I had never really been like a data practitioner at Facebook. Later on, I had worked there for a while. I left and I co-founded a company called Smite. We basically built trust and safety as a service for some of the largest social networks in the world. So it was the product was you sent us event data, like user logged in, user posted this message, etc. We would run it through a bunch of analysis in real time, and we would basically try to identify spam, abuse, harassment, like kind of all the fake inventory, all the stuff that you don't want to see on a marketplace or social network. We would try to programmatically identify and provide tooling to help trust and safety analysts, data scientists, and engineers, build a solution to the problem. So as I started and went through that journey, it's a data product at the end of the day. We have a lot of real-time stream processing and a lot of batch jobs in the background that would pull data from a bunch of different sources, do some sort of aggregation, and land it in either a data warehouse or production system, or train an ML model and serve it up to the customer. And we've frankly built a bunch of ad hoc stuff for that. So we had a lot of cron jobs and scheduled queries and these kind of ad hoc Python services that would serve up like pickled models that we were pretty sure were the right model, but we weren't like 100% sure a lot of times. And so there was just a lot of engineering work that had to go into making that system even work. And then, in terms of ensuring the quality of what we were doing, we had tests and stuff like that, but it was a lot of work to build that stuff out. And there weren't a lot of tools out back in 2014, 2015 when we started the company that could really help us out with that. So as we kind of progressed, we eventually sold the company to Twitter, and Twitter had a lot of those similar challenges, but at a larger scale, like a global scale. And as the modern data stack was kind of coming together over these years, and the best practices were starting to solidify a little bit, I had kind of known that Nick had started this company in this space, and I was like kind of every week getting a greater appreciation for it. And I actually watched as Twitter like started adopting Airflow and was originally like really excited, like, hey, this is like a huge value add over these like cron jobs that we have and this Scala-based stuff that we had kind of built in-house. And then over time, kind of, the trough of disillusionment. I watched kind of that whole journey, right? And a lot of the concerns that the engineers in my org were talking about were things that I had heard Nick talk about for a while. So I was like, wow, like, I think the Dagster team is onto something and has been a couple years ahead of at least my understanding of the space. So I know this is a really long answer, Dennis. I'm sorry.
No, it's all gold.
So anyway, with just over time, I started to really get an appreciation of that problem, and early this year in February, decided to make the leap to join Elemental as the head of engineering, and it was just great. Like, it's been a lot of fun so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's worthy of an entire class. I really enjoy the framework. So just kind of curious, going off that, just what's something that you may have built at Twitter or something that like you really would have liked to re-implement with Dagster, and like how would it have been different?
Yeah, so when we talk, so I'll speak to kind of the really acute problems that we had at Smite, because there were, as a small startup, and those problems are kind of magnified at larger companies, right? But like, at Smite, we would pull in a lot of data sources. So for example, there are, databases that you pull in on a daily basis of, IP address ranges that are known to be like spammers, known to be data center IP ranges, and also the kind of geo IP databases that map an IP address to geographic location with varying degrees of accuracy and trustworthiness. There's also a bunch of different reputation databases for email addresses, domain names, ISPs, credit cards, and things like that. And we have to like aggregate all of that data into one place and then use a number of those factors to make a risk decision based on real-time data. And one of the problems that we had was we would sometimes have some of these data sets go stale. And, every time we would integrate with one of these data sets, we would have to stand up alarms for them. We would have to figure out like, what is the SLA on this thing? What happens if the data is missing? Like, do we actually compute with the stale data, or do we fail the kind of dependent jobs on that? And then what does that do to the quality of our scores and the SLAs that we have with our customers? So there was like a whole class of problems there that we solved with a bunch of manual engineering. And so like, we built a little microservices framework in Python that ran in Kubernetes, and we stood up a bunch of PagerDuty stuff. And we had this really kind of bad setup where anytime one of our data scientists wanted to bring in a new data set or, create a new derived data set based on some data that we had, they would have to pair with one of our infrastructure engineers to actually take that thing to production. And that just slowed everybody down. Like, infrastructure engineers didn't feel like they were working on scalable things. The data scientists didn't feel like they were empowered. And our data scientists were kind of like half data scientists, half data engineer. They were writing Python and deploying stuff, but they weren't like fully empowered to do their job end to end. And it was just not a great experience for anybody involved. And so I think, had we had something like Dagster back then, we would have been able to iterate much more quickly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's talking about the modern data stack. I think that's the biggest thing I've seen change, is just like really treating things more like full applications rather than just that collection of just random tasks that somehow interlock with each other. But so besides that, like, what do you think is kind of the biggest change in the data space between when you were doing things in like 2014 and now?
Well, speaking with my personal experience, cloud data warehouse, the rapid adoption of that and the ubiquity of it has been one of the biggest changes. I mean, back in 2014, I had never really heard of it, like that term. And we started using Google Cloud BigQuery for Smite. And frankly, like the reason why we were using it was because like they gave us the most free cloud credits back then. And we were like, well, I guess we'll use this service. But we ended up, like, there were a number of really interesting things that I noticed. So number one was we could just do a ton with it. So we would just like log basically every event that happened in the system into like this append only table. And then for a really long time, we could just kind of like derive a lot of really interesting insights from that and prototype things in the data warehouse. And then when we were confident that we had a good anti-spam signal, we could then productionize that into the streaming production system. The second thing was we always felt like, you know, because we had that event log in the cloud data warehouse and it was so cheap back then, the stakes were a lot lower when we were doing rollouts and big changes to the system, because we felt like we did always have a system of record and historical data that we could use to restore from backup. And then it became a really interesting collaboration point. So there were two things here that were really interesting. The first was we started having customers requesting access to their raw underlying data in the data warehouse. And the second was we started actually doing implementations directly on top of data warehouses. So we would say, hey, you know, the real production deployment of this thing needs to be real time. It's fully streaming, but you can dip your toe in and just, you know, give us credentials to your data warehouse and we can start to show you a set of insights. Maybe you can't action on them in real time, but like we can at least start to demonstrate some of the value of the system. So cloud data warehouse was kind of the first big thing that that really, to me, indicated that the modern data stack was starting to come together. And then once you had that in place, you know, you start to see all these really interesting ETL and reverse ETL tools coming online. And that's been really empowering for all sorts of technical and non-technical stakeholders within the organization. Hey, Dennis, I think you muted.
I was. So given just some of the complexity of the systems you've been on, like, how do you determine if a project you've been on is successful?
Yeah, I mean, that's successful is a broad term, right? And so if you think about it holistically, right, like I think that there are a number of stakeholders. So if you think about the business first, right, not that we're putting the business first, but like that's one of the first stakeholders you would think of. You know, did the project get completed when we thought it would? And did, you know, was the data asset that was produced like correct and of high quality? And then was it actually meaningful? And did it help the business make a critical decision or roll out a critical product? You know, I think that those are the aspects that like kind of businesses look at when we say, hey, was this data project successful? You know, is this team, you know, performing well, et cetera? I think there's another really important stakeholder though, which is the data engineers, the data scientists, the people who are actually like putting their hands on the keyboard every day and interacting with these systems. Like, are they happy? And like, are they maximally productive? Because, you know, it still is, even though there's a lot of kind of macroeconomic concerns, like there still is a really hot job market and these people can work anywhere and they don't have to stay at your company. And so you have to, you know, make sure that people are happy and empowered and feel like they're growing in their career. And I think a big, huge part of that is the tools. Like, do you have access to high quality tools that work and that let you do your job? There's also, you know, cultural aspects there too. And, you know, other parts about the company and the team. And, you know, you have to have a manager who's not horrible and all that kind of stuff. But with respect to kind of like the actual practice of data engineering, you know, I do think success looks like happy people, you know, building these data assets and then high quality, actionable outputs that arrive, reasonably on time.
So it's interesting to think of a component of success as just like the happiness of the team. I think that shows why you're a manager and I'm not. But just kind of thinking, are there things you think that like data teams do that they shouldn't be doing anymore, that just kind of like anything that just increases unhappiness unnecessarily?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't know how much we want to really rant right now, but so I think that there's a couple ways to answer that question. So one area where I've seen at least data teams that I've worked with in the past kind of struggle a little bit is going from that prototype exploratory script, or going from the exploratory script on your laptop to the prototype that is like technically running on production data, but like nobody should trust its outputs, to like business critical thing that the entire business runs on. Like, I think that a lot of teams, they get into that last category like too quickly or like unintentionally. And so, just being really straight up with kind of the consumers of your data asset and your different cross-functional stakeholders about the current state of the world and like the level of engagement that you expect to have and maintenance that you expect to have on these assets has been an area that I've seen, many times. So I can't tell you how many projects I've dug into, then there's been a failure and it's like, oh, like somebody got like, or somebody left the company and this job was running under their personal like user account. It's like, what? Like we need to do some infra hardening on this thing. Like, how did this thing make it into production? It's like, well, no one ever knew it was being used in production. You know what I mean? It was just there and somebody remixed this data asset and something became critical. So I would say that just being a little bit more rigorous and thoughtful about how your data is going to be used and make sure that you have those conversations. And somewhat related to that is just making sure that you really nail, and again, this is the manager in me speaking, but like making sure that you nail the cross-team collaboration and conversations. And I think that collaboration, it's not just limited to data engineering, but it's also in any engineering field. You've got to collaborate with your stakeholders as well as your peer technical teams. And I think that sometimes that collaboration can be like a little uncomfortable and require a lot of work to get right. And I've seen teams in the past say, I don't want to collaborate with those jerks over there. I'm just going to go build my own thing over here. And sometimes not collaborating is the right choice because it is the more efficient option. But I think the non-collaboration should be an explicit choice that is the right choice for the company, not something that you do because you're like trying to avoid a potentially difficult conversation with a peer team.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just having a conversation with my manager today about kind of tagging and wireframing applications and how you can create assets with like quick feedback, but still not like quite committing them to like, this is the real production version of this. So it does seem like it's something that comes up a lot.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I think just one more thing to kind of close out, and then I think we want to save some time for questions from the audience. But yeah, if you just having been at engineering for a while, just do you have any general career advice for anyone who's looking to kind of get started in the space?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think just always be learning is the first one. So I think that when I've made career decisions in the past, when I advise people on their career, I think you want to be explicit about. I think you want to always be learning, but you want to be really thoughtful about, hey, am I at a step in my career where I really want to focus on learning as the primary goal, or do I want to really kind of switch to like spreading my wings and flying a little bit for the next year or two? So taking the stuff that I've already learned and applying it. Said another way, being explicit about, hey, am I trying to learn from other people at my company, or am I trying to learn from like the environment teaching me and giving me feedback from like executing against the market? So, you know, I would be explicit about the goals that you're trying to achieve when kind of making a job switch, but you know, early in your career, I really think it should be focused on you know, finding a team where you see somebody on that team, you're like, I really want to learn from that person. And then when you land at the company, being really explicit about, you know, your goals and saying, listen, I want to make sure that I'm developing and I'm learning. And you know, if your manager is doing their job properly, they'll align your career goals with what the company needs to do. So you'll get put on projects that stretch you a little bit, and help you learn. Other things, you know, I would always ask for help. At least my experience in the tech community has been that everybody has been really open and nice and wants to help. So, you know, just like cold DMing somebody on Twitter or LinkedIn or something and saying, hey, like, I see that you know, you did this thing. I would love to learn more, or whatever. Like, people like answer those all the time. And so I wouldn't be afraid to kind of reach out to those folks. And the same goes for open source projects too. If you want to contribute to an open source project, just go send the pull request. Well, you know, maybe you want to actually like talk to the maintainers before sending your first pull request a little bit, make sure that it's actually going to be, you know, useful. But yeah, you know, it's just I think that the data community is like very open and welcoming, and just, you know, talk to people.
Yeah, that's definitely been my experience. It's a very good, it's a very welcoming community, and everyone has their areas that they're really interested in and passionate about, and everyone has their project that they've been working on and just can't wait to share with everyone else. So yeah, it's been a very nice group to be part of.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we can pass this back to Judy, and yeah, if there's been any questions, we can chat about those.
Great.
I know we had a question from Nick.
I don't think I see it.
Oh, he raised his hand. Yeah, and then Nick Acosta. Here, Nick, I'm gonna allow you to talk.
Hi, sorry, I just posted in the Q&A. That was an accident, but thanks for doing this. Happy to be here.
Oh, okay.
Nice to meet you, Nick.
No worries. I'm gonna put you back. Do you have other questions from the audience?
I don't think I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I don't see any either. Oh, great. You guys have creative freedom to talk about whatever you want.
So how's the co-rise course? Is it any good?
So far, it's, well, only really had a QA go through it so far, and it's like anything. There's some things to work out, but I don't know, I'm excited about it. It's the great thing with Dagster of just there's so much to the framework that it just really, you're picking what you want to cut out for 4 weeks, just because you could fill in everything. And as I've been creating things, I kind of go off on tangents and then have to just rein myself back in, because it's like, okay, is this really critical? It's like, no, but it's really cool. And it's like, okay, we'll kind of keep that to the side. We'll kind of just keep this to what's really necessary, because the whole goal of the course is to just really start with a really simple pipeline that's kind of similar to, I don't know, I feel like I've done it at a couple companies of just, it's a pretty light ingestion, processing, and then pushing out to a different data store. It's the kind of thing that you can pretty easily do in like 60 lines of Python, set it up on a cron and have it unreliably just like exist out there until it breaks and suddenly you're answering questions. But so really just kind of, as we're talking about, just treating it more like a real application of like, how can you build this that's something that you can like write tests against and just deploy in different environments and really kind of take it on a full path to production. So yeah, it's really just, I don't know, it's a love letter to Dagster. So I've been enjoying working on it.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Dennis, we do have 2 questions now.
Oh, okay.
Looks like the first question is, what would you say is the main advantage over Airflow? I don't know, Dennis, you're running the course. Would you like to take a shot at that one, or should I?
I can give a quick one. I should say, like, when I got into Dagster, I didn't have as many real ties to Airflow. So when I was starting up, I was kind of surveying what's changed, because it was starting to get to that point where people were starting to have like some stories of like Airflow, I don't know, some production issues with Airflow. So I just wanted to look what else was available. But the main thing that I initially really found interesting with Dagster was just the ability to really deploy in different environments with different infrastructure setups. So being able to kind of deploy locally within Docker and then move it to maybe like your staging account that has different configurations, and then to your production account with different configurations, without having to really change like the core code of the pipes, which is just always where like so many bugs get introduced. So really just being able to have this ability to like front load testing with data applications was just such a game changer. And just being able to kind of iterate on things confidently and really just be able to push them out and not have to do that like terrifying back and forth of like, I'm going to push this into a cloud environment, wait 15 minutes and kind of pray. You really don't have to do that as much with Dagster. Like, we've, in the places I've used it at, or the organizations I've used it at, we really catch our bugs early, and like we don't have any, it's rare to have issues in production that aren't the like result of an external system, like an external API being down or something like that. So that was really the initial thing that really I found enticing about Dagster.
Yeah, I'd say that we hear a lot about testability from Dagster users that come in from Airflow. I like to say that Dagster has second mover advantage. Like, Airflow was a great innovator in the space, and the first kind of really the first orchestrator, I would say. But by especially like, you know, earlier versions of Airflow, like you would see kind of XComs was hacked on, and you know, you don't have those problems in kind of the next generation orchestrators like Dagster. So I think there's a lot of focus on the whole software development lifecycle, from testing to production to observability and then back again, or to operation and then back again. One of the other big advantages that or one of the big differentiators that we have is our software-defined assets and asset orientation. So the idea here is that if you can express your data asset, whether that is a table in a warehouse or an ML model or a report, as a pure Python function that takes in other data assets as inputs and then outputs, you know, again, that asset, it opens up a lot of possibilities and really cool things that you can do, you know, especially when you can model those assets from third-party systems. So you can have an asset that takes in a table that, you know, DBT produced, and then, you know, stores that in some abstracted away storage system through Dagster's IO manager abstraction. So Dennis, I totally echo everything that you just said, but also add the asset orientation as something that people have been really excited about lately.
Yeah, it's been funny with the evolution of assets, because in putting the course together, I've been rereading a lot of the Dagster blog, and it's just funny to see just in that very first blog post, they really highlight like the importance of assets, and it just been great how that's just evolved over the last 2 years to really become like the core abstraction layer. And like, what are you on? Wait, no, it's about to be Dagster 1.0 soon. So yeah.
Yeah. So I've dropped a link, by the way, to a blog post about Dagster and Airflow and how they tie together. So if you want to read that as well, you're welcome to that. Yeah, I would also add there are going to be a lot more differentiators, and a lot of new cool stuff that Dagster is coming out with really soon now. So keep an eye out for some new news from us very soon. It looks like Fraser had a second question as well, or a question as well. Pete, what is your perspective on the future of the modern data stack and explosion of new tools or consolidation? What is the impact on orchestration? It's a great question. I mean, right now we're seeing an explosion of tools, I would say. It seems like every week I'm seeing like a new VC funded modern data stack startup coming out. So I think that we're seeing a lot, an explosion of new tools right now. At some point there will be some amount of consolidation. I'm not sure how much, but our kind of view is there will always be a heterogeneous set of tools that practitioners need to use and talk to, and that the orchestrator sits in the middle and talks to all of them and unifies them under a single pane of glass. Without that, it's really hard to solve a lot of these problems that we highlighted earlier in the chat, like figuring out what is the maturity level of all of my jobs and how often are they running and are they up to date. Without an orchestrator sitting in the middle, keeping track of all that stuff, it becomes pretty chaotic and hard to reason about what's going on in your system. I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that, Dennis?
Yeah, I think that's all true. I think the thing that I think data teams now just have to be a lot more discerning about the tools they're taking on into their stack, because the data tools are just becoming increasingly specialized, and there starts to be overlap in a lot of areas. So when you're bringing something on, really focusing on what you're looking to get out of this tool, because there are certain things that it's like, does this, I don't know, there might be like a feature in Snowflake that gets you 90% of the way there. Do you really need to bring on something else to do this? But yeah, I agree that regardless of kind of how many tools are in your data stack, you still want that one thing to kind of hold it all together and give you like single visibility, just so you're not clicking through 9 different dashboards to really get like a sense of what exactly is happening and like what you're producing as a data team. Because I think that's one thing that can kind of get lost sometimes when you start to have so many different tools, is you kind of get so caught up in like, is everything running correctly? And you kind of forget like, well, really what we're trying to do is deliver assets for the organization. So even if everything has like that green check next to it in its UI, like you do want to just still have that single place you can look and just see, are my assets being created? Are they stale? Is everything downstream of them up to date? So that's, yeah, I think whatever your configuration is, there'll be a need for something like a Dagster.
I agree.
Other questions, folks?
I guess one last thing for me, we if you're into these types of conversations, we're going to have an event coming up August 9th. You can check out dagster.io. It's called Dagster Day, and you should all be there. It'll be a lot of fun.
Cool. I'm posting that. It's this one, right? Dagster.io.
Yeah, it's here's the specific link to the event. I just shared it.
Okay, awesome. Here, I'm going to share it with everyone again. Great. Well, I think we can end it early, actually. This has been an awesome conversation, Pete and Dennis, and thanks to everyone with questions. Oh, exactly when I said we can end it early, we have one more question. Do you guys want to take it? Any advice on Dagster integrations with Google Cloud Functions / Lambda functions?
It's a broad question. You know, I think it might be useful to take that into maybe the Dagster Slack, and we could talk about it there.
Yeah, I guess speaking from experience, we've had, as we onboarded with Dagster at my last company and still had some data science things existing, parts of them as Lambdas, like you can always invoke a Lambda through Dagster as you're kind of moving things fully into Dagster. But yeah, like Pete said, I'm sure there's a bunch of engineers on Elemental who would give a much better answer than that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, you know, Dagster is meant for orchestrating, you know, external compute. So it should be a matter of just kind of calling out to those Lambda functions using, you know, the provided credentials, and Dagster should be able to bring visibility to that and orchestrate that. But, you know, happy to you know, go more in depth on Slack too. Our Slack community is linked from our website. It's dagster.io/community has all of the kind of community resources that we have for you. I just shared it into the chat.
Great. Okay, well, in that case, I think we can wrap. Thanks so much, Pete, and thanks so much, Dennis.
Thank you, Judy. And
Yeah,
thanks,
thank you
Dennis,
for
for the great
hosting.
questions.
Yeah, thank you for all the insight.
See ya.
All right, have a good one, guys.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.